Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff McNaughton, and I'm the Senior Director of Industry and Theatrical and Programmer of Prime Time here at Tiff. I am thrilled to be able to present the North American premiere of Sort of, and I am so excited to be sitting down with creators Bilal Baig and Fab Filippo to discuss the series. Welcome and congrats to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I was hoping we could start, I guess, at the beginning of the Sort of journey for both of you. Can you tell me where Sabi and the concept of the story came from?
Oh, gosh. Wow. Oh, okay. So do you want like origin, like how Fab and I met?
Oh, yeah. How you met and really how the story kind of came together.
Okay. So how we met was on we were both working as actors on a play at the Tarragon Theatre here in Toronto. And my experience
is called Theory.
Yes.
I'll interject.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and you might have a totally different take of how it all went down for you. Well, I think you actually do. I know for me, one of the things that I found so interesting was even though Fab and I didn't share a single scene together, we were kind of observing that while we were working as actors on that project, we had our own kind of writing constantly on our laptops when we weren't kind of in scenes, and we're observing that, I think, about each other. And it was Fab after the play had ended who had reached out to me and asked about my kind of interest in creating television and creating something together. And I was, I think for me, I think the medium of TV and who it can reach and how many people is super attractive, but I'm terrified of so many things. And I just didn't know that it was something that I totally wanted to embark on until we started to really jam on what the thing could be. And it was in me asking Fab, why us together? Like, where if I'm gonna kind of bring my honesty and truth or a version of myself into the storytelling, where are you, Fab? And Fab went away and thought about that question and came back and I think said one of the most really moving things to me around looking at the show, like all the characters as they all navigate a sort of transition. And even though their transitions can be different and society looks at the term transition and how it applies to each person in different ways, there was something really that felt so kind of, here's a chance to really build empathy for folks who are navigating multiple transitions. And that just sounded so exciting, and that it was about us together creating something. And I was just so curious about it, what it meant for two people who are so different. Like, I think we can see just by looking at Fab and myself, how many, identity wise, at least how different we can be, and what does it mean to actually collaborate and create something together. And then I think, Fab, from that point on, it was just like swapping stories back and forth, and arcs kind of emerged.
Yeah, I remember the point where we were jamming on kind of ideas back and forth a little bit. And this was happening over a period of months. And then we had this thought that we should do something kind of loosely based around some of Bilal's memories being a nanny. Mm-hmm. And then we were talking about that. We were both really excited about that. And then Bilal asked the question, well, who are you in the story? What's your entrance into the story? And then we came up with Paul, played by Gray Powell, and on the show. But when we came up with Paul, the story ideas just started to tumble out of us. It was really it was hard to hold them in.
And that's really interesting. You talk about, understanding what each individual brought to that project in terms of how you work together as collaborators. Was there something that you felt like, was a strength that one of you had versus the other in terms of that collaboration?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think I'll speak to, I think, in my opinion, what Fab's strength was in kind of embarking on this journey together. I think from the start there was, I remember it came from Fab, this idea, let's co-create together, let's co-show run together, let's co-executive produce together, and the invitation, me as somebody who'd never done TV, wasn't even really thinking about it, to be invited in that way felt really powerful. And I think every moment after that, there was just, oh gosh, that's okay, right? That's my cat. She's gonna
totally. I love it. You're. I think we lost a feed there. Is it just me?
Yeah, no.
It's not me.
Bilal's frozen.
Okay.
Oh, you're coming back.
I'm coming back. We can edit this, not to worry.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that. This should be. Can you all hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm frozen, or I'm not frozen?
Not frozen.
Not frozen.
Not frozen.
Okay, great.
Maybe it's easier. I'll start with that question again, and we can take it from there, so it's easier to cut. I think. I don't know. All right.
Agrees.
So I'm curious about, you mentioned collaboration, and I'm curious about, what each of you thought that the other's real true strength was in terms of coming into that project and collaborating together.
I'll say for Fab and working with Fab, I think that one of the things that started to make me feel like this could be something that will really be quite powerful is his invitation for us to work together so equally and so collaboratively. Like, it came from Fab, the proposal of co-creating together, co-show running, co-writing, co-executive producing, and what it just did to me was it told me that this here is somebody who's actually interested in everything that I can kind of bring and sees me as an equal, and that just that space that creates that comfort, it was so important for me, and I think part of that was Fab also offering his vulnerability in creating something together. That the offer of the character of Paul and all the story that came from that requires somebody to share their heart with you, and it was so nice to receive that from somebody who's been working in the industry for a while, who I didn't totally know, and it really matters to me, people who can kind of see each other and bring themselves and their hearts into the work.
Yeah, my experience of meeting Bilal actually kind of goes with me talking about their strengths, because when we were working together on this show at the Tarragon, I was struck by how self-possessed and how articulate and how kind Bilal was, but how they carried themselves with a kind of clarity. And their voice, when I started to get to know them as a writer, had that same kind of clarity. And when I got invited into this collaboration, when we invited each other into this collaboration, there were two things really that happened to me because of Bilal. And one was that I got to see the world through their eyes, because they invited me in, they let me see it. And that was really huge. That was it was a moving experience, but it was also this kind of creative connectedness that I just felt I haven't really done this before with anybody. And then the second thing really is, how it had affected my writing. And this word kind is thrown around a lot, but there's we sort of assume sometimes when we're writing and we're trying to be funny that there's an underlying need to be mean, you know, and I think I was kind of carrying that. And then when we started to collaborate, I was like, oh, you can have stakes in a scene can be funny, but you're not engaging in a kind of ridicule of a character, you know, and it was exhilarating. And then I knew what we were making together was transformative and positive and in a genuine way.
It sounds like such an exercise of trust in many ways. And I'm curious in terms of, you know, in the pre-production process, did you have guiding principles that you shared when bringing on other collaborators, the directors, other writers, cast, crew, to ensure that your collective story was treated as you imagined it to be treated?
You know, I think what's coming up for me is I'm really thinking about experiences in the writer's room, but also, in that pre-production phase. Like, it really was, I know for myself, and I feel like Fab shares this too, about really listening to who's there and what they have to say and what they're bringing, you know, and to hold that space for that to really exist, and for us to then take it away and decide, okay, what does it all entirely land, or do we need to shift or tweak? But for the most part, it really felt like what we were both invested in was making space for people to express themselves and their point of view, because the world of our show is not just Fab and myself. You know, there's lots of other or versions of Fab and myself. I should make that really clear. I actually think that Sabi and I are quite different, and I love that. But that there are so many other characters too, and it's important to hear what other people are bringing.
Yeah, and I just want to add that I think Jennifer Kawaja and Laurel Perlmutter, producers, and everyone at Sienna really contributed when it came to adding creative forces to what we're doing. You know, I know that, you know, Ian Rashid, who's in the writing room, and Jen Engels and Nilu Handa, all three of those, you know, in fact, the way we did everything with Sienna was all together, and we all really listened to each other, and nobody ever tried to kind of stomp on anyone else. And I think that was remarkable, and also just wonderful that we're so proud also of the final product.
What made, speaking of partners, what made CBC the right partner for the series?
I'll say. Oh, why don't you start? Because I've just
I just love this story. I just want to tell the story.
You tell that story, and then I'm going to say a little piece of it that I still think about sometimes.
Okay, well, you know, there were a couple of sort of, you know, you don't just pitch a show and then it gets greenlit, right? There were a couple of sort of, you know, we had meetings, we talked, you know, all that stuff. So one of the things that we had done early on is we shot with Sienna. It was Sienna's idea to do it, a sizzle reel, a 4-minute sort of sample of what this show would be. And it was Bilal's first time on camera. And we together wrote like a, you know, what was it, like a 16-page script that we ended up cutting it down to about a 4-minute reel. And so this little reel started to get shared around CBC. And people started to watch it more and more and more. And by the time we went into our final meeting to be told that we were greenlit, the assistant of one of the executives was starstruck by Bilal. Because she had seen the reel so many times. And I just remember Bilal walking in and she went, "Oh my God, it's you."
Anyway. I mean, and that I remember that experience. And again, talk about being so terrified. Like it was everything that I imagined a TV exec's office would look like big glass windows and high up. And we got there, and I remember being so nervous and not totally knowing what was going to come out of it. But I still remember I think it was Trish Williams who had, when we were talking about the sizzle, referred to, was talking about the different aspects of Sabi's life and talked about their biological family, but also referred to their friends and the folks at the bar as their trans family. Mm-hmm. And I was just so moved by, somebody seeing that through that 4-minute sizzle. And it meant that, maybe I don't have to be so scared all the time, because I think people are seeing or are picking up what we're putting down. And that was a real moment of reassurance for me. Like, I think these folks at CBC really got it. They just loved it and could see the things that we were trying to offer through that sizzle.
Yeah, and the development and making the show, Bilal mentioned Trish Williams, Sandra Pacheca, Sally Cato. Everyone really was either seeing the show or trying to see the show. Because when you're making something and you're in the middle of it, it can get a little murky, and you're finding it, And it was a great experience to be so supported, yeah, they just really got it. I agree.
I think I'm going to tie something back to an earlier point you both made. A major theme thread sort of is transition in relation to love, sexuality, family, career, and more. Why do you think some people fear transition? And for both of you, what makes transition in life a healthy and important experience?
Wow. I mean, I think to your first question, I'm sure there's something about like fear of change. I think when we feel really comfortable in our ways, we feel secure and like we know ourselves, and that to change or start to recognize that maybe something in you is shifting, could feel disorienting, destabilizing. I think that word, I love it so much, and I know that it applies to all people, but I think we maybe perhaps society has attached it only to folks who are considering medical transition or not, but I think the more we can kind of look at ourselves and see how we are shifting on a constant basis, moment to moment, I think that could be good for all of us, because I think it's true. I think we changed, before we got on this call, and then we're on this call, and then we're gonna change the second we're off of it. And yeah, I do think that there's a fear around that word, and I just wish we could move towards accepting it, embracing it, all of us.
Yeah, I feel like, humans are wired in this really kind of funny way where we are constantly trying to hold on to things that are stable, because we are always living in the middle of uncertainty. That's what we all have in common. And we're discovering in everywhere that things exist on a spectrum. And what's exciting about being a part of this for me is knowing that whatever my gender is or how I've come to identify with it exists on a spectrum. And I got to sort of explore who I am based on this notion that there's no fixed idea of what male is or female or anything in between, or where you are in your life, frankly. I mean, this idea that you've arrived and you're successful, or this idea that, we're always moving and shifting, and labels help us because they orient us. But I think the danger probably ends up being when you think the label is everything. And that's partly what I learned through this. And then the second thing is this notion, I think, that writer Alok Ved Menon says about non-binariness, and that we have this erroneous idea that we have to understand somebody before we love them. Mm. And why do we think that? So this notion that there can be comprehension, compassion before comprehension is really powerful. And for me, it's been really powerful and revolutionary.
I know we're running tight on time, but I do have two more questions. And one of them is, well, I've read that you mentor to queer and trans youth and support under-resourced communities through workshops. What advice do you give young storytellers and performers on how to navigate a system that has historically not created enough opportunities for their voices to be heard?
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I look back at some of the stuff that I was doing when I was 18, 19, and all through theater school, I just kept like working on this play that nobody seemed to want, but I was like, maybe one day somebody will. And I think for me, the thing I love to kind of share with people is finding what you love about the thing that you're creating. Why are we telling stories? Like, what is it about that thing you're working on that you're obsessed with, that you keep thinking about? And that can be a real engine. You know, I think so often we're seeking validation in getting a grant or having somebody, you know, meet us for coffee and tell us that we're amazing budding artists, and that's all good for sure. I love that stuff, but I think that when we can really tap in and find our own engine, it for me, it was enough to carry me through a couple of years where it really felt like the things that I wanted to tell were just too out there or too much. Like, you can't have all of these kind of identities in one character. And anyways, the shorter answer to your question is just around finding that internal engine and really asking yourself, why am I obsessed with the thing I'm working on right now? And I think we should all really be thinking about that all the time.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree. And I guess a question to close this out is, you know, at TIFF, you will both have the opportunity to see this series with a live audience. And this is an experience series creators don't often get. Maybe starting with you, Fab, as someone who may be more used to seeing your work on a smaller screen at home, what do you hope and think that experience will feel like?
I think it will be terrifying. I will be standing at the back of the theater. You know, it's going to be amazing to be able to hear what the responses are. We never thought that we would be able to do something like this. I feel incredibly grateful. But, you know, as one of the directors as well, you know, I'm like, I never meant this for the big screen. So there's a little bit of that. But yeah, mostly just like incredible gratitude. And yeah, it's really, you don't get this. And so I'm definitely going to be in that theater and just listening.
And Bilal, I'm going to change the question slightly. For you, as someone with a background in theater who is used to that kind of instant, you know, reaction from an audience, what do you think it's going to be like for you to see this series in front of a live audience?
Oh, I don't know. I think so right now, especially as we're ramping up, for me, it's so day by day, just one step at a time. And I get quite nervous thinking about, excited, you know, thinking about finally being able to share this thing that we've been working on for a little while now. I think for myself, it's, I love hearing breath and laughter, or you can almost hear when people are kind of leaning in. And for me, I'm just curious about what would those moments be for an audience. And it's great. You know, I've had the experience of performing with an audience, and this is great that, you know, yes, technically I still am, but that's been captured, and I can actually experience it as a like a person in the room. And so I think for me, I'm super curious. I've never had this kind of experience, and I think there's so much to learn about how people respond in the moment to the work. And so, like Fab, I feel like I'll really be listening out for how people receive the story.
Well, I did see the news the other day that HBO Max and other kind of international distributors have picked up the show, which is fantastic news. And I think to the earlier story, Fab, that you told in relation to, being starstruck, I think that's going to happen more often. It probably won't. You might not be able to get used to it, but there's going to be so many eyeballs on this series, and so deservingly so. And I just wanted to congratulate both of you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. That's so nice.